Yo, Snoop Dogg and D.I.
Hello and welcome back, Villanova Nation. This is Villanova Tip Time, the Villanova men's basketball pregame show, part of the Nova Insider Network, presented by Homefield Apparel. I am your host, Chris Notaro. Today is Wednesday, January 3rd, 2024, and I am so pumped to be back with you in the new year. We've had our second sort of extended little mini break in a row. Had a nice break before Big East play opened up. Had another nice break after the Cats started 2-0. So it's been a long wait, but a lot of positive momentum, obviously, with the Cats technically sitting in first place in the conference after that strong start. We have so much to talk about here tonight as we welcome Sean Miller and Xavier into the Fin. And tonight we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. We're going to talk about that 2-0 start in conference. We're going to talk about what that means for the narrative roller coaster. We're going to talk about what lies immediately ahead for Nova today and beyond in the next couple of games. We'll introduce this year's Xavier team, of course, talk about keys to the game and get you on your way by 8:30 over to Fox Sports 1. As is tradition, we have to talk a little bit about Homefield Apparel, our sponsor here. Use promo code Nova Insider, all one word, over at Homefield Apparel's website. They have I literally can't keep saying the same thing over and over. The merch is sweet. The designs are sweet. They have stuff for the Nova fans in your life. They have stuff for most major other college programs that you may want to look for if you're gift giving for somebody else. But the merch is really cool. You can see some of our folks out there repping it. Trevor's been all over town with the bomber jacket, looking great at some of the games, getting on camera and all that good stuff. But again, promo code Nova Insider for that. Also, one of the other, content ideas, things I'm working on that hopefully I'll be producing in the next week or two. I want to give you a look at the new Tip Time headquarters. You may notice a little bit different, a little bit crisper camera, a little bit more lighting. I want to give you a look at the inside of the office, sort of redone. I think I mentioned this a little bit on the last episode. I'm geeking out because we use the exact Villanova color tones for the walls. The wall behind me is the exact Villanova. I think it's grayscale, warm gray 9, I think is the exact color with a little hint of blue. So super cool. Want to pump out some content around that. But let's get into Nova Hoop, shall we? Let's talk about what we saw in the first week of Big East play before this most recent mini break. Obviously, we've been off for about a week and a half. Feels like forever ago that Nova was playing at Creighton with that OT win in Omaha. And then a good beatdown of DePaul in Chicago on Christmas Eve. There's a lot to like about both of these things. Really quick, Creighton first. Winning in Omaha is a good thing, like anytime you can do it. It's a really hard place to win. It's a big Q1 win for the Nova resume. And while I will repeat over and over again that rankings don't really matter, especially at this point in the season, but they're always cool and fun. It's always cool and fun to be ranked. That said, I'm not looking at rankings so much right now as I am the fact that Nova currently has a better resume from a wins perspective than most teams outside of the top 10, maybe the top 5. That said, they also have more bad losses than a lot of teams that you see in the top 20, top 25. So those things weigh out. I think that's the big reason why you don't see Nova ranked this week. Again, can't say it enough. Rankings don't matter, but it's cool and fun to be ranked. Rankings, of course, will matter very much when it comes to seed lines at the end of March. We'll talk about that later. Full 40 did a really good roundup on Twitter yesterday of all the kind of various metrics and where we sit. You're going to start to pay attention to those things, especially as you evaluate the matchups coming up, whether they be quad 1 or quad 2, mostly for Villanova the rest of the way. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But winning in Omaha, huge. Q1 wins, always huge. Next thing about Omaha that stands out for me, and stop me if you've heard this before. Kalkbrenner has a decent game, but Eric Dixon has a monster game, and the Cats win. Dixon goes for 32 and 6 in that one, puts on an absolute clinic, carries the team for the most part. I'll also say this is where the Hakeem Hart should start train really started to pick up momentum for me, as he was Dixon's primary support in that win in Omaha. Fast forward a couple days later to DePaul. I, along with many other people, all we wanted was kind of a no-stress business trip, take care of business. This shouldn't be a game. If this Villanova team is the team we think they are, the team that we want them to be, They really shouldn't trip over that game. And it was such a pleasant surprise they didn't. There was really no stress in Chicago. I think it took them a little while out of the gate. They didn't really start to pull away until like midway into the first half, but then they really didn't look back from there. And of course, then ended with the largest margin of victory in the Kyle Neptune era so far. So while you probably didn't learn a lot about the Cats in this game, you're going to have these where you just have to take care of business. And the DePaul games are absolutely those, both home and away. And they got the away one out of the way with a really just solid wire-to-wire victory. The Hakeem Hart should start train is now too loud to ignore after the DePaul game. He has 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists in that one in just 20 minutes off the bench. I think they announced the starting lineups just a few moments ago for tonight. We do not see Hakeem Hart in that starting lineup, but we want to continue to see him get this amount of run, this amount of burn, maybe even a little bit more. And then ultimately, I think we want to see him in the starting lineup, the starting rotation sometime very soon. Last thing I'll say about DePaul, it was a really well-balanced performance overall. The box score shows it. The box score shows spreading the love. Everybody ate. Extra shout out to Burton and Bamba for putting in work on the glass with that one. That's one of those things that jumps out on the box score 2 weeks later. Burton had 9 boards. Bamba had 8. Love to see those hustle stats on the sheet. So where's the narrative roller coaster right now? This season has been a roller coaster already. I feel like we've had many seasons within the season so far, but where are we on that roller coaster? I gotta say, I think we're in a good place. It'd be really hard for you not to be in a good place. Are there things that you want to see this team improve? If you're taking stock at like a pseudo halfway point, of course. But to be riding off that 2-0 start in the Big East, going into this nice second long break, they've got a couple of winnable games coming up, but as we'll talk about in a second, we overlooked nobody. We have to make sure that we're the more intense team every night, even in these games where we're favored. But when it comes to the narrative roller coaster, you have to feel like it's trending up right now. I mentioned earlier, Full 40 did a rundown. So these are all as of January 1st when this rundown tweet came out. Villanova currently sits at 26 in the net, 22 in KenPom, 24 in KPI, 19 in BPI, 16 in Haslametrics, which is my personal favorite and is where they have Nova the best ranked at 16. And then Bart Torvik has us at 23. So I think you're seeing a lot of consistency. I think there are some outliers. I've seen Nova, there was one like CBB on Fox that has had Nova at like the 10 seed line, the 11 seed line. I think that's too low given their resume. You have some seeing them as high as a 6. Again, it's a little bit too early to be overly worried about seeding concerns. But the story between that and all the metrics have us sort of right where we want to be in the kind of the lower end of the top 25. And I think that's appropriate for Nova. But I also think something we said earlier, a comment that was made by a very loyal Arizona supporter friend of mine, said this year's Nova team looks really interesting. Like they can beat anybody. They can beat anybody on any given night, but they also could theoretically drop a stinker to anybody on any given night. And I think we're going to see an unpredictable road through conference play. And I think we're going to get a couple of crazy good wins out of this team. I think we might get an annoying loss or two, but that's okay. It's all part of the fun. So starting the conference play with a win at Creighton was huge. Really, I think mostly just to avoid chasing the ghost like we were what seemed like all of conference season last year. Like the math window seemed to close so early last year because of not only the bind that the team was in from non-conference or a poor non-conference earlier in the year, the injury issues all across the team. It seemed like they were chasing something that wasn't attainable all season. And that is just not what's happening right now with this year's team. Of course, yes, there's a couple of bad losses. You never want to call yourselves a shoo-in the first week of January. There's a long season left. There's a lot of road to go. But Nova's done well enough, but putting the important ones on the resume early, that they're not chasing a ghost. They're in the driver's seat. They do control their own destiny from here in a very serious way. I do think from a roller coaster perspective, the fan base has appeared to be very temperamental. I think the vibe is only, one disjointed loss away from crisis mode really at all times. And I think that's just something we're going to have to ride out. It seems like folks are very on edge after the kind of topsy-turviness of last season, and rightfully so. But I think that means the extremes of the roller coaster are kind of bouncing back and forth all the more quickly. Another thing to kind of point out from the narrative roller coaster is sort of the mixed opinions or mixed reactions on how the team is handling the Justin Moore injury and updates related to that injury. He's been in a day-to-day status for almost a full month now, which I think seems a little, I would say, frustrating. if you're looking for transparency from the team, for sure. But also, I think there's something to be said for them playing cards as close to the vest as they can and making sure they don't rush him back. I saw Eugene from VU Hoops just tweeted something, a quote, a soundbite that our guy Tommy G had gotten from Justin Moore himself, like within the day or two following the incident in Kansas State, which led to the Justin Moore knee injury. And I think it's, these sort of knee sprains are lingering. They're not issues that go away really quickly. So I think the fact that the program is calling him day to day, I would expect that if he's not back today, they're probably not going to rush him back for St. John's. So if you look forward, ideally, you'd like to have Justin Moore back for what I would call a tune-up game against DePaul next Friday so that he's ready to go when the Cats travel to Milwaukee to take on Marquette thereafter. All right. So I think before we get into what's ahead and introducing Xavier, I think one of the things that I find myself saying over and over, and it really is just a derivation of effort and attitude and all that good stuff. But you can draw a tight corollary between wins and losses and whether or not this Villanova team is the more intense team. Now, you can be the more intense team and still lose the game. It's not a guaranteed victory, but I think there's just such a direct correlation from when this team is clearly being outworked and out-hustled. You kind of know within the first couple minutes that they're going to struggle to keep up in that game. But they've really, when they've been clearly the more intense team, even in the close ones, they figured out how to pull that out. And kind of Creighton comes to mind, where I think even though both teams were really struggling to score at times, Nova was definitely coming across as the more intense team and ended up pulling it out in the end. And that's true of a lot of the close wins that Nova has this season. One of the other things I'm looking for is for players and coaches to continue to gel as they have more time playing together now. I think for players, you want to avoid these crazy long scoring droughts that have plagued the team at time in the season. And for the coaches, I think we all really want to see we want them to spare us the really weird lineup rotations that blow up the flow. That's happened a couple times early in games where the teams had to kind of dig out from that issue. And you want to see the coaches improve just as much as you want to see the players improve on that front. So getting into Xavier now, and before we actually get into Xavier, if you think about what the road that lies ahead, I kind of teased it already. You've got Xavier tonight. You've got St. John's on Saturday. Then you've got almost a whole nother week off before you welcome DePaul in to the Finn next Friday. That's Martin Luther King Day weekend. On Martin Luther King Day Monday, Villanova is going to be playing in Milwaukee at Marquette. It's a day game. So I would say there's a real chance to go 5-0, but I don't want to be the mush on that. Because if I say there's a real chance to go 5-0, I feel like it almost cements that they lose tonight or against the Johnnies or both. So we're not going to say that. But it's important, I think, as we always say, as the program always says, that the next game is the most important one because they have a real chance to be looking good headed into that showdown in Marquette, to be bringing a lot of momentum into that game, which is going to be important because that's a really, really tough environment to play in. And Marquette's obviously very, very good this year. So I think that's going to be one of the toughest road games we've had in a long while. And we want to see Nova come into that one sort of riding that momentum high. So let's talk about Xavier. Coached by Sean Miller, having returned home after a stint at Arizona that, I'm not going to comment on how it ended, but didn't end the greatest for him. But he ended up back home at Xavier, and I think the Big East Conference is better for that. The Xavier team this year isn't necessarily turning heads, but I also don't think they're a pushover either. They're coming in at 7-6. They're 1-1 in Big East play. They lost by 17 at St. John's, and they won by 20 at home against Seton Hall. I know the transitive property doesn't apply to sports, but last I checked, Seton Hall was giving Providence everything they can handle at Providence. You'll know what happens in that game finishing up before I will. But I think just goes to say, you can't say it over and over again, that there are no easy games in the Big East. And maybe, yes, we can maybe pull DePaul aside, maybe pull Georgetown aside. But generally speaking, there are no big easy games in the Big East, and Xavier is certainly not an exception to that. The biggest name most of you are going to recognize is Zach Fremantle, but you won't see him tonight and possibly not this season at all, coming off of foot surgery in the fall. So if you want to know a little bit about the Xavier team and who you should be looking out for, I think you're going to start with the three-headed guard monster, all averaging north of 30 minutes a game, so all playing more than 3/4 of the game. You've got Quincy Olivari averaging 18 points and shooting 43% from deep. Really, their only major deep threat who's playing that many minutes. You've got Desmond Claude averaging 15 points and almost 5 rebounds and 4 assists a game. And you've got Davion McKnight adding 9 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. Like I said, the three-headed guard monster. One thing that sticks out about this team is really that they play good defense, top 25 defense, number 24 on KenPom. Just of note, they're overall 44 on KenPom, so definitely a formidable opponent coming into the Fin tonight. Again, I can't say this enough, not a pushover game, not a layup game. And like I said, Xavier's playing good defense, and what sticks out is they play very strong perimeter defense. So we'll talk about that in a second when we talk about kind of keys to the matchup, but something to keep an eye on, that the Cats can't get too happy chucking up threes because they're going to be playing a team that defends those really well. Xavier played Purdue really close when Purdue was ranked number 2. I think they ended up losing that game by just over double digits, like 13, but they respectable performance. Houston, even closer. I think they lost by 6 when Houston was ranked number 6 at the times of those games. And tonight begins a tough stretch for them. They have Nova tonight. They've got UConn at home at the Cintas Center in a week. And then they go to Providence at the Dunk 3 days later. So this begins a pretty tough 3-game stretch for Xavier that they're going to want to start with a W because they've got UConn next up. And they're going to need some signature wins if they're going to play their way into the tournament conversation, and they know it. So you should expect this team to come out playing strong. Sean Miller's a great coach. This is a talented team. And honestly, if you just strip away all the tension and what you want to see and kind of overanalyzing the game, I'm just excited to sit down and watch this Big East basketball game tonight between these two teams. So when I think about keys to the game, I already covered one of them, but I think really important to be the more intense team. Specifically, Xavier rebounds the ball really well. And Villanova preaches defense and rebounding till they're blue in the face, especially when they're facing scrutiny about lackluster offense. And so be the more intense team is super important to not only defend home court and not drop a game that you really should win, but also acknowledging that this team defends the three well and they rebound well. And so if you're Villanova, you can control your effort, you can control your intensity, and you need to dial that up and make sure you don't give up, get cleaned up on the boards at home. The second key to the game is playing through Eric Dixon. I think this is just going to be a standing key to the game for this Villanova team, right below shoot 'em up, sleep 'em in the streets, because our success this season has been directly corollary to playing through Eric Dixon. Has Eric Dixon has gone, so has Villanova's success gone. Shout out to Tommy G in the Mainline Minute because he called this out on the show, which dropped yesterday. But spotlight on the matchup between Eric Dixon and Abu Usman. Abu Usman's really physical down-low defender who I think is going to give Eric Dixon a good run. And like I said, they also play good three-point defense. And so Villanova is most likely going to try to play through Eric Dixon, going to try to open things up on the perimeter. But there's going to be someone there standing in their way who's equal to the challenge. And so what sort of wrinkles Villanova can throw at that, I think is going to make a really big difference and be a key to tonight's game. But with that brings us down right to 8:30. We're almost ready to go here from the main line. We're going to see you on Saturday ahead of Villanova's lunch date with the Johnnies. Shout out our friends at the Full 40. They're doing a crossover episode, I believe, tomorrow night with some folks, what I've been justly referring to as a delegate, a contingent from the Johnnies. But they're doing a fun crossover episode tomorrow night. You should definitely check that out before the game on Saturday. But we'll see you then for pregame on, again, Saturday around lunchtime. Get those beverages refilled right now and get ready to lock in over on FS1. Ladies and gentlemen, it's tip time.